Welcome to Evolve Podcasts, an open forum on personal growth and cultivating a positive mindset. I'm your host, Joe Fitzpatrick. Today on the show, we have my friend, David Smith. David and I have known each other for quite a while now. We met, I think, a couple years after I moved to Richmond. We met probably around 2018, I want to say. We got really close through the pop-up workout group November project at the VMFA, which is a free pop-up workout for members of the Richmond community to go and run and do different bodyweight exercises, a lot of burpees, a lot of jumping jacks, things of that nature. We've stayed friends ever since. I took a break from the November project when the pandemic happened to focus on other types of activity, but we continued to be friends through a love of running. We've done a series of trail runs together, including my first trail marathon, which we did in 2019, and I've had so much fun just running through the woods with David, and recently we've shared our love for cycling together as well. So, David, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's great to be here. I think it might have been back in 2017.
Yeah.
Or if not 2016 when we met. So it's been a little while now. Yeah.
It has. Yeah. Lots of good memories along the way. And I know you also were formerly incarcerated. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of your story, and now you work as a lobbyist and advocate for people who were formerly incarcerated for social justice reform. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. So through being in a really bad spot in life and making some bad decisions with some addiction-related stuff, ended up locked up for about 3 years from 2016 to from 2013 to 2016. Mm-hmm. And I'd never really been politically active before then. I spent that time in prison. I realized things were really messed up. I was fortunate. I had a family support system. I had financial resources. I had connections with people in the community that I was able to get employment and housing when I got out. But I saw that was not the case for other folks. And I knew we had to make some changes. So I began to get involved in this criminal justice reform space while working in other jobs. And I did that, probably got involved starting around 2017 in solitary confinement and some reentry issues. Just a little bit after I got out, kind of got on my feet, then got involved in that. And ended up leading the Virginia Coalition on Solitary Confinement for a couple years, but it was in 2021 when I was working for Allianz, this big international insurance company here in Richmond. Mm-hmm. They knew about my charges. They didn't have a problem with it. I was one of their top employees in my department. I was leading an international product launch, and then a coworker complained about having to work with somebody who had been convicted of a felony. Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, this was during COVID when everyone was work from home, right?
Right.
But they couldn't handle it, and instead of working with that employee, like, hey, let's do some training, let's do some building up, let's do some education. They called me up. I honestly thought I was getting a promotion because I've been working on this project launch, heading this project launch. And they're like, no, we're letting you go effective immediately because we don't want to deal with it. It's like, wow. So that really solidified in my mind that this is a space I need to work in. I need to work in this space where we're changing people's hearts and minds. Part of it is legislative, yeah, but part of it is also really working with changing the narrative on what it means to be someone who has been incarcerated, who has survived incarceration, and is now part of society again.
I'm curious, did you file any sort of lawsuit against Allianz for like wrongful termination?
Well, see, I looked into that. I've got some friends at the ACLU of Virginia. They connect me with an employment lawyer. And because Virginia is a right to work state, it's also a right to fire state. Mm-hmm. And as long as they're not firing you for a protected reason, gender, religion, things like that, you have no recourse.
That's unfortunate.
They did offer me a severance package, which came with a non-disclosure agreement where I couldn't talk about it, but the severance package was 2 weeks pay. So I was like, I'm not going to take 2 weeks pay to stay quiet about that. But it was very unfortunate the way things worked out. But looking at the big picture, because this is about growth and change, right? Looking at the big picture, that was the impetus in my life to say, you know what, how can I use my talents, my skills, my abilities in a way that's really impacting more people and really changing the narrative, changing the system. And that's when I went all in on the advocacy, lobbying, and really narrative work in this space.
Right. And can you tell me about some of the different groups that you work with? You mentioned the Virginia Coalition on Solitary Confinement. Can you highlight more about like what they do as well as some of the other organizations?
Yeah, so Virginia Coalition on Solitary Confinement, that's a group I actually led for several years. And what we were able to do was take the issue of solitary confinement. That's when you're locking someone up in a cell for 24 to 22 hours a day, not giving them access to basic needs or any of those real human interactions that we have. So when that coalition got started, which would have been in 2016, and I got involved in 2017. This was an issue that the Democrats didn't even really want to touch. We had a few progressive Democrats, Delegate Hope from Arlington, I believe, Arlington or Alexandria. Those two ACDs always get me confused up there in Northern Virginia. Apologies to you folks in Northern Virginia. But he was a real champion for that, but we never gained any traction. It was very much a progressive issue. What I was able to do with the help of some others is make it a bipartisan issue. Really educate the politicians about what's happening in our prisons, that there are folks that in some cases were locked up for 13 years in solitary confinement in Virginia's prisons, which is insane when you think about it. I mean, how did you do during COVID, like being locked in your house all day?
Got a little stir crazy from time to time, but I survived.
Yeah, and you had your nice big screen TV, all your web streaming stuff.
Of home.
Yeah.
Right.
So these are guys that have spent, I was in for 16 and a half months in a cinder block cell. I was fortunate that I had a TV, but that was about it. Mm-hmm. It messes with your mind, and the politicians didn't realize that. So we educated them. We helped them see this was not some soft on crime, this issue. This was a how do we treat our citizens? How do we treat individuals? How do we treat people, God's creation issue? And this last year, in the 2023 General Assembly session, with a Republican House and a Republican governor, we were able to get a bill passed and signed into law that as of July 1, everyone in Virginia's prisons is guaranteed 4 hours out of cell time a day. And
that's great.
That's huge. I mean, it's not the end. Don't get me wrong. And we can still keep these people in this situation for indefinite amounts of time, which is bad. But they're guaranteed that out of cell time every day now. And except for lockdowns, always a little caveat, right? But this is a huge step forward for our state. And we did it by making an issue that had been a progressive issue, turn it into a nonpartisan issue.
Was that bill that passed SB 108?
It was a variation of that. So you had done some work. You'd done some media work for us on that. You did some great PSAs for us. But yeah, so what happened is we had our ideal bill, which Senator Morrissey, the almost former Senator Morrissey, had been a wonderful champion of. And then we had another bill that Glenn Davis, another former delegate, he recently resigned to take a job in the administration. He took another bill, which was one that he knew could get Republican support. Because when you have a divided legislature, you have to have support from both parties, right?
Right.
So, yeah, Morrissey's bill is the ideal bill. That didn't get through, but Morrissey supported what was going on in Davis's bill because he saw that 4 hours out of cell time. He knew that that was the win, and he was able to get that through. So it was a good win for both sides.
Yeah. You're clearly very passionate about this topic. I'm curious to know if you're willing to share what's been your personal experience with solitary confinement while you were incarcerated?
You ever hear that old saying, like, a frog in a pot of water doesn't realize it's boiling, or doesn't realize it's being cooked?
Yeah.
That's basically what it was like. You don't realize what's happening until you're on the outside. You don't realize the lack of reality you have, the lack of being in touch with reality, until you're back in touch with it again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a situation where you're deprived, a situation where you're deprived of human contact, of conversation. And so you start having conversations with the TV. I thought it was perfectly normal to have conversations with The Big Bang Theory. It was one of those shows at the time I could watch like 6 episodes a night between different channels we had. So pretty soon, watching 6 episodes a night, you've seen every single Big Bang episode. And I knew all the lines, and I made up my lines to go in between their lines. Like I was part of that friend set. And it seemed perfectly normal. But it's not until you get out and you have a chance to step back and say, wow, what was going on there? It seemed perfectly normal that when you would smell smoke, like we thought the building was burning down one time, but they were tarring a roof. Mm-hmm. But you're locked in the cell and like, well, I guess this is how I'm going to die. And it felt perfectly normal. I just went back and laid on my bunks like, I can't get out of here. No matter how hard I kick or how hard I yell, they're not coming for me. Let me just get comfortable for these last few minutes, whatever it is. And that felt perfectly normal. That despair, that depression. So coming out of that, coming back into society, being around people that loved you and cared for you, it was jarring. And it was a growth process. I mean, I'm still a much more solitary person than I ever was before. I love my trail running, like you were talking about earlier. We ran that trail marathon together. That was my first marathon too. But I'm usually a happier guy running 13 miles on the trail by myself as opposed to being on a group run, just because it feels more comfortable still to be alone than it does to be in groups sometimes.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for asking.
I'm curious to know about some of the other groups that you worked with. I know OAR is one as well.
There are several other groups I've really done a lot of work with. OAR, Opportunity Alliance Reentry, Opportunity Alliance Reentry here in Richmond. They're the main reentry services provider, and the work that we do there is great. Sarah Dimmick is the executive director, and she is just a dynamo when it comes to motivating her staff and getting the resources that are needed there. What we do at OAR is we work to equip people getting out of jail and prison to succeed. What do they need? What are the resources they need? How do they need to be equipped in order to remove those barriers that send people back to incarceration? In that same vein, in my lobbying, advocacy, and strategic planning firm, and Thrive Advocacy Solutions, I've worked with OAR Nova, which is a separate entity, same name, but a separate group. Working with them on strategic planning on how do they maximize their strength in this Northern Virginia area in order to change policy at this local, state, and federal level to really help people that are coming back from prison. And it's also to divert people from going into an incarceration situation. I'm doing a lot of work with a group called Social Action Linking Together, SALT. They're one of my clients, and that's a group that focuses on some of the injustices going on in prisons. One of our big concerns right now is what's happening at Lawrenceville. That's the one private prison in Virginia, and they have rates of drug overdose and assaults and staff turnover that are 2 to 10 times higher than equivalent prisons in that Southside Virginia area, which is a really big concern for us. What's happening at this private facility, and why are those folks that are incarcerated there not getting the same care, not getting the same treatment, and having access to drugs more than people at other facilities around there?
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's a lot out there, and it's hidden behind the walls. So,
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that are working hard in this space. I'm an advisor with a new super PAC and 501c3 called A More Just America. And we're looking at the big picture, like how can we really mobilize on a large scale to change the political climate, build political power, bipartisan political power, both on the Republican and Democratic side, to make common sense changes to our criminal justice system that reduces incarceration and removes those barriers to reentry that lead to recidivism.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your consulting business in Thrive, and you've been building this brand around In Thrive. I know you have a In Thrive Film Festival.
I do.
And an In Thrive podcast, and you've been building like more social media content for that too. So can you tell me about starting that business, when that all happened, and how it's been going?
This has been a long process to get where I am today. In Thrive started while I was in that solitary confinement cell. I started writing. I started doing devotionals, writing out devotionals, because I'm a person of faith. I'm a Christian. And we'd get our daily bread devotionals, and they were talking about, when you look outside and see the flowers, and all I could look around and see were cement walls. Like, no, this isn't speaking to me. So I started writing a daily devotional for people who are incarcerated, people who are in solitary, a daily devotional based on our reality. And I came up with the name In Thrive as an amalgamation from incarceration to thriving. Incarceration, thriving, and thrive. So that's where that name came from. Like, how do we move from incarceration to thriving in our lives? And the devotionals were the first step of that. That was the idea that I could implement at that time. And that was really the first thing I did when I got out of prison, is I got on my little computer and laptop and just started typing up all these pages. I had created probably around 450 of these daily devotionals while I was in solitary, and a little bit while I was in general population. So I published those, self-published those on Amazon. You can still find them. Look up David Smith on Amazon and devotional, and they'll probably pop up. But then I was like, okay, this is nice, but this is only one aspect. So the next part of In Thrive, which I had come up with while I was incarcerated, was, hey, how about a kind of like life coaching for people about to go into incarceration? So I worked on that business plan. I launched that in 2016 and shut it down in 2017 because I realized something. One, the people that had the resources to pay for something like this usually were of the mindset that they didn't do anything wrong and they were going to survive just fine. And the people that realized they needed help were the folks that didn't have any resources, so I couldn't make a living off of that. So I still had the resources, but I still had the product I had created, but it wasn't a way for me to make a living. So fast forward now, so that was 2017-ish. Fast forward to 2021 when I got laid off from when I got fired from Allianz, let's call it what it was. When I got fired from Allianz, I started doing the podcast because I had this time. And one of the things we haven't talked about is Safer Virginia and the sex offender registry and all that, where I really discovered there are a lot of people that are not able to go to church, worship in church, because of sometimes laws, sometimes just people's attitudes to folks who have certain charges. So that had never been an issue for me. I'd always been able to go to church, but I knew this was a struggle for people and they were looking for something. So I created this In Thrive podcast, which was basically a church message, devotion, time of confession, absolution. I'm a little bit on the liturgical side, very sacramental in my personal life, and really a chance to bring that message of hope and healing and repentance to people that weren't able to get that. And that lasted for a little while, but that took a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm well aware.
You're doing 30 episodes a time or something like that. I was struggling to get one episode out a week. And that was something I never wanted to try to monetize. It felt wrong to monetize that. So that's still out there. It's still sitting up there for the people that stumble across it.
But you're not actively producing.
I'm not actively producing that. I am working on some other stuff. So with the new iteration of In Thrive is now the advocacy, lobbying, and strategic planning side. So this is where I am actually working with organizations to help empower them to turn their passion into policy. A lot of this is focused in the criminal justice space because that's where my contacts are, but I'm not limited to that. With that, I am now creating a weekly video called Better Advocacy in 10 Minutes or Less. Slightly cheeky videos, posting those on YouTube every week about different strategies to become a better advocate. How can you get that idea you have from your head or from your organization to a public policy? So that is now where I'm putting that effort. I'm posting that every week. I've also got a LinkedIn article I put out every week about some type of topic on Virginia policy. Maybe it's commerce and energy, which is what I did for my delegate. I've worked for Delegate Kay Corey for a couple years as her commerce and energy aide. So basically doing all that work in that space, I'm taking that information, saying how can we translate this to something that the average citizen can use to become involved in politics, to really change policy, or at the very least understand the policy that's going on.
Right. Well, it's incredible to hear how you've taken this brand from its inception when you were in prison to what it is now, and you've pivoted in different directions along the way when you realized it wasn't working one way, but you could try it a different way. And it sounds like you're really making it work. And, I applaud you for that, for, sticking to it and, continuing to come back to it with a fresh perspective.
It's very exciting when the people actually start writing the checks that aren't like 2 figures. When they get to the 3 and 4 figure checks start coming in, that's very exciting. That's beginning to happen now. It's taken a while, but it's
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's finding in this space for me. It was finding what are my talents, skills, and abilities, and what do people want to pay for, and where do those overlap?
Right, and finding the organizations with the budget as well as the interests that are willing to support that cause.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, that's fantastic. I applaud you again for doing that work. It is work that needs to be done.
Thank you.
But you also didn't mention the film festival.
Oh, the film! I got so many irons in the fire right now. So the film festival. This is something that grew out of a realization I had dealing with policy. So a couple years ago, I guess we're probably about 3 years ago now, Virginia had a Democratic governor, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic House. It was a trifecta for criminal justice reform. And we really got a lot of things passed. However, because there wasn't a broad-based change, as soon as the power flipped, a lot of that was pushback about the steps that were taken to remove barriers to people who've been incarcerated. And I realized the problem is we need to change the narrative. There's the pop culture predominant narrative that someone who gets arrested is always going to reoffend, is always going to go back to the same ways, and that's just not the case. There's also the idea that those people are different than us. I mean, I was a upper middle class suburban preacher who ended up locked up. I didn't fit the mold. And I astonished a lot of legislators when I went up there and started talking about my incarceration. They're looking at me as their brother or their son, not as this guy who's, no offense, tatted up and earrings or shaved head, no offense again. But you have this image of who's the person locked up versus who's the upstanding citizen. And I had that clean cut. And so in Thrive Film Festival, the purpose of this film festival is to provide a voice for people who have been previously incarcerated, to amplify their narratives they want to tell, those stories they want to tell. We are the first film festival in the country, probably in the world, that focuses exclusively on the voices of previously incarcerated folks. I realized, unfortunately, after I started this, that there are very few people that have been previously incarcerated that are able to tell their own stories because there are so many barriers to that. And a lot of people don't want to define themselves by their incarceration.
Right.
I mean, I'm previously incarcerated, but that's not my identity.
Right.
But that's what a lot of people want to hear about. These filmmakers that are previously incarcerated, that's part of their history, And maybe they want to talk about that story or some of the injustices, but they've got other stories they want to share too. They've got other stories they want to tell as well. And giving them a platform to share those stories, to show the general public then that people that are incarcerated, that have survived that trauma, because let's be honest, this is trauma.
Absolutely.
If you survive incarceration, there's not much in life you can't survive. I'm a firm believer of that. If you survive solitary confinement for more than a couple of days, there's not much in life you can't survive. Mm-hmm. And these are people that have skills and talents and voices, and I want to lift those up. I want to allow people to hear those, and by hearing them, by seeing these stories being told visually, because, I mean, film is a powerful medium. You work in film yourself. Mm-hmm. And allowing those stories to be told in this powerful medium, exposing the general public to those stories, transforms those narratives. It changes those narratives that other people have about folks that have been incarcerated. When we change those narratives, we change the way people see folks coming out of prison, coming out of jail, coming out of whatever their encounter with the criminal justice system might have been. It humanizes them, and it allows them to then say, you know what? Maybe we don't need all these extra restrictions. Maybe we don't need to be as punitive, and we should be more restorative as a society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, restorative justice is really the goal, though it's not always attained like it should be.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like, I don't know if you're doing this or not, but giving more incarcerated people access and resources to the tools necessary to tell their own stories is part of the mission too.
Exactly. So that's a spot where funding is needed. And we are a first-year festival, and most first-year festivals are pretty much self-funded. Yeah. So the long-term goal here is to actually create a space where people are coming together to get upskilled, to learn what they need to know to make their stories accessible to the general public, to meet with other people, to network with folks that are in this space, learning how to do this. Yeah,
it would be a great opportunity for local filmmakers and production companies to partner with your organization so that they could provide workshops and guidance for people who really want to make their own films about their incarceration stories, or the resulting effects of that, or what led to that, any aspect of the story that they want to tell.
Whatever story they want to tell. And by the way, if any of you all want to help fund this, thriveff@gmail.com. That's in Thrive Film Festival, and thriveff@gmail.com. Send me an email. We'll talk. First Baptist Church is our host. They have an incredible space there. We're very excited about that. It's a big church in the middle of the city with parking, which is wonderful, right off the bus line too. So double bonus there.
Yeah. That's Jim's church, right?
Yeah, Jim Somerville, a good friend of ours. He is incredibly supportive of this, and I can't thank him enough for opening his doors, because that would have been a huge, huge expense for us. And they are donating the space, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but possibly also the tech help as well. We might have to end up paying for that, depending on. But still, this space is incredible. We are partnering with a bunch of reentry nonprofit organizations here in the Central Virginia area. They're going to be there as our community partners. And it's just going to be a wonderful day of celebrating the voices of previously incarcerated, where people can come and hear those stories and talk to some of the filmmakers. We're going to have a series of panels and discussions, and what we were talking about a little bit earlier about really uplifting those voices. How do we equip people to tell those stories? We're going to be having panels with folks that are in the funding space. And if this works out this year, this might not be a this year thing, this might be a next year thing, have a morning seminar on getting into the film industry for folks. So
awesome.
Richmond has a film industry, and we hope to help expand that here.
Yeah, that's great.
Big picture with this festival. This is a proof of concept. I'd love to expand it to other cities. I'd love to take it to cities that have film industries like Atlanta or New York, DC, just these different places, and bring that there where we can introduce more people not only to those stories that are being told by the folks who survived incarceration, but also connecting people that have been previously incarcerated to this type of employment, to this type of work, so that they can tell their stories now.
I imagine there would be immense interest in other cities, especially bigger cities like New York and Atlanta, where there are high crime rates in certain areas. People who have been incarcerated are everywhere, and formerly incarcerated, more than people realize. It would be an incredible opportunity to share that with other cities and provide that platform.
Exactly. That is the hope and that is the goal, my friend. Yes.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your life before you were incarcerated. You mentioned that you were a pastor at a church.
Yeah.
I know you have a couple of kids.
I got 3 kids, yep.
You used to be married to someone else. Now you're newly married to someone. Tell me about the old David prior to prison.
The old David had, on the outside, the ideal American life. We had the big house in the suburbs. I had a good paying job. I was a pastor at a growing congregation, a growing church. I mean, there weren't many churches growing, and we were growing by 10% a year. My wife at the time, she had a great job. We both had master's degrees. Our kids were smart. They still are smart. I shouldn't use the past tense there. But everything looked great on the outside, but on the inside, there was just a lot of struggle and strife. And I don't need to go into the details because it's something that I think we all experience. We all experience struggle. We all experience strife. And it's how do we deal with that? What were we equipped with from our childhood to deal with? And how did we as adults make decisions on dealing with the trauma that we experienced both as kids and then as adults? And despite having the financial resources, despite having the knowledge of how to get help for myself, I just didn't do it. And I let myself go deeper and deeper in this addiction hole until it took everything away from me. I mean, literally, it took my career, it took my reputation, it took my family. I'm still basically estranged from my 2 oldest kids. My youngest one I talk to and I see, but that's happens because the court says it has to happen. I hope it continues. I love all my kids, but I don't know what the future holds because I was in a pretty bad place when I hit rock bottom. And I did a post about this on Instagram. I'm not much of a sharer on social media. If you go to my Instagram account, I started it back when I turned 40, I think it was, and that was 5 years ago, and all the posts still fit on one page. But last year, there was this thing going around with the 10-year transformation picture.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I posted a picture of me from 10 years ago, and I was down in Costa Rica on a vacation with my wife at the time, and I've just got this kind of goofy smile on my face and everything looks fine. It's your typical early 30s guy type thing going, yeah, look at me, world's my oyster type thing. Yeah, happy. And on the inside, I was just dying. And I look back and in that post I wrote, I'm jealous of those people who say they don't have any regrets in life because that means that they haven't hurt people like I hurt people. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard to know that the things that I did in private, my darkest secrets became known. I was a headline news story in several media markets in Virginia when I got arrested. When I had my court dates. The news truck showed up outside of my house while I was locked up. How do you prepare your kids for that? You can't. I can't begin to know the trauma they went through. I can't begin to know the hurt they went through. And that's something I have to accept and live with. If they never talk to me again, I totally understand because I hurt them deeply. Because we had everything on the outside. It looked like everything was going great. We were taking international vacations. We would go on several trips a year. We had the nice house. Our kids did well in school and in sports and in scouts and in church and everything like that. But inside I was falling apart.
Yeah.
And then I fell apart on the outside. And there was a lot of damage that came from that. So, but it's been a rebuilding process. I mean, I jokingly call it my forced midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And it took some learning. It took growth. It took really reflecting on who I am as a person. What does it mean to be David? How do I chart a path forward when my past can be such a big anchor sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. And our past can weigh us down. You know, I've struggled with my past for years, reflecting on how I had hurt people,
Mm-hmm.
reflecting on resentment that I felt towards my family for different things that happened in my childhood, reflecting on personal feelings of insecurity and judging myself, not feeling good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully I've been able to heal myself from those things and gain more self-confidence. But, you know, it takes time. It takes practice. It takes intention and mindfulness and, you know, getting uncomfortable in certain situations so that you can grow, like you said.
I mean, to borrow some 12-step language, you make amends
Right.
as best you can, but not everybody's there. And when we hurt somebody, when we realize that we need to acknowledge it, we need to acknowledge that we hurt somebody, we need to acknowledge that our actions have caused pain in whatever form that might look like. But at the same time, if you beat yourself up over that, if you're not able to look back and say, that was my past, I made my amends, I attempted my amends, I've changed my life as part of my amends. But even if they're not willing to accept that anymore, if I am constantly beating myself up because they're not accepting that I've changed, then I'm holding myself back.
Mm-hmm.
It's being able to say, I've changed, I've shown you I've changed, I've done what I can, but I'm not going to beat myself up, hold myself back, because you won't accept that change.
Yeah. And I'm just curious to know, like, what are your thoughts on quote unquote cancel culture? Like, that's become popularized in the media in like the past few years. And, you know, I have an idea of what you might say, but I just want to get your perspective on it.
Look, I'm a big First Amendment guy. I think people are going to say stupid stuff.
Yeah.
They're going to say stuff you disagree with. But when we try to stifle that free speech, it might work momentarily, but it's going to come back and bite you in the butt.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're holding people accountable today for something they did 10, 15 years ago. Especially if they've admitted that they've done something wrong and they're trying to rebuild their life. I mean, my heart breaks for people that have rebuilt their life for whatever it might have been, and then somebody brings up something from their past. Mm-hmm. It's like, look, I remember when I was locked up, we had a building trades instructor, our floor covering instructor. He would tell us, look, the only reason why I'm not in here is because nobody caught me. That's the only reason why I'm not locked up right now. Mm-hmm. Most everyone, not everybody, most everyone has done something or has had thoughts or has acted out in some way in private in a way that would really freak people out around him. Mm-hmm. And we need to show grace. We should show grace. I don't want to. It's better for our society to show grace to people whose deepest, darkest thoughts we know that have been exposed.
Right.
Say, look, this person might have done this in the past, but that's not who they are now. Mm-hmm. Instead of shutting them down, we should hold them up as an example of change and transformation.
Yeah. And I think the same applies to all people, you know, celebrities, but also everyday folk, you know, that you interact with on a daily basis. Celebrities are in a certain spotlight and get much more media attention, but the same applies to everyone. People who are held in higher esteem or like higher media presence should be treated any differently.
I mean, in a sense, I experienced cancel culture at Allianz.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
I was literally canceled from my job,
Right.
not because of anything about the present or any of my time at Allianz. I wasn't even hiding anything
Right.
from there. I mean,
They knew about it.
yeah, I'm sure you don't tell your coworkers every little dark secret that you've ever done that might. No, that's our past. We've grown beyond that. We've evolved beyond that.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not a fan of cancel culture. I think people need to recognize there are consequences for what they say and do.
Sure.
But if we're talking about something that's happened in somebody's past and they've changed, and then they get canceled, that breaks my heart.
So, how do you define who you are now? Who is David now?
I'm just trying to show love to everybody. And what does that mean? It means different things in different places. I said I'm grounded in my faith. I'm a Christian. I see my value, and I see your value, and I see anybody's value, and that they are a creation of God. Whether you believe in God or not, I think we all came from the same God. And we all have value because we are all God's creation. And I expand that to not just individual people, but Earth as a whole, our space, our existence, all this stuff. Seeing it as God's creation, it has value in and of itself. Doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter if you've achieved a lot, doesn't matter if you haven't, you have value. And you are worthy of love, and I want to love you. And the question then is, how do I live that out? What does it mean to love one another as you love yourself? Not in looking at, I don't love myself in a good way, but what does it actually mean in that idealized form, in that, how does this look? And it can look different ways in different places. I mean, it's showing respect. It's being patient. It's offering forgiveness before it's asked of you. It's putting yourself out there, being vulnerable at times, but also at times having those walls up when you need to be safe. Not everybody gets everything, right?
Right.
So, yeah. What does it mean to be David now? I guess in the practical sense, the way I live my life now. On the personal side, it's exploring. Whether that's running down a trail in the dark because it makes it for a new fun challenge, or whether that's traveling halfway around the world and spending 48 hours in a country and seeing as much as I can in the midnight sun. Or going with my wife to experience the life, her friends, and where she came from, and seeing stuff that I never would have had an interest in, except here's the person I love, and this is important to her, and by golly, this is kind of fun. So it's showing love, it's exploring, and it's just saying yes to life. That was kind of a motto I came up with for myself maybe about a year after getting out of prison. Like, just say yes to life. There's so many times we say no. And we should say no sometimes. We need boundaries, right?
Right.
You need to keep yourself safe. But when somebody says, hey, why don't we do this? Dave, I think, has Dave been on your podcast, the cyclist? Dave?
He was on in season 1.
Yeah. I was unemployed at the time. And he calls me up and says, hey, can you come out and pick me up? I'm in Oregon right now. And I'm like, sure, why not? And we had this incredible 2-week cross-country road trip. I drove out there, camped with bison in North Dakota, and spent time with a friend in Wisconsin, and drove down the most incredible road in Idaho to meet up with him. And then we spent the next 2 weeks just kind of bouncing around a general easterly course. He took me to Crater Lake National Park. It wasn't on my to-do list. And that was one of the most amazing places I've been. Jumped off a 30-foot cliff into the clearest water in the world. And
Awesome.
We're just driving through this amazing countryside. And sometimes it's something I want to do, sometimes it's something he wants to do. We end up at Speed Week at the Bonneville Salt Flats, where these vehicles are going like, what, 900 miles an hour? Some obscene speed. And we're just sitting out there watching this go by. It was just, I mean, these incredible string of events. I said yes when he said, hey, do you want to pick me up? And then he said yes, and I said, hey, why don't we go over here? And it was a lot of saying yes as we're just bouncing across the country.
Yeah, you never know where that next yes is going to lead you.
Yeah. When I proposed to Kelsey, my wife, we were in Denmark, didn't even have a diamond ring. I just had a little wedding, what I call her barn band. She has a horse, so I have a little barn band she can wear to the barn. And hadn't told anybody I was going to propose to her. And she says yes. And it's just been a wonderful ride since then. You asked me, hey, do you want to help me train for a marathon? I never wanted to run more than 7 miles. My goal was to run 7 miles without stopping, because that's how long the loop around the downtown river area in Richmond was. That was my goal. And you're like, you want to run a marathon? It's like, no, but I'll train you because I can run through the woods with you, and that sounds fun. But yeah, just saying yes to life.
I love that. We can call that our mindset moment for this episode, because saying yes to life sums it up very well. And, thank you so much for, helping me train and run that marathon. I said multiple times, and I'll say it again, I don't think I could have done it without you.
The only reason you finished, Joe, because if you'd stopped, you would have had to deal with me singing and cheering you on even more. I think just continually singing, like, I got to get away from this guy now.
Yeah. Yeah. That was part of it. Yeah. But seriously,
it was so much fun.
It was a good time, and we've had more fun runs since then, though that was where we spent most of our time together, all those hours on the trail at Pocahontas State Park, and during the actual race up in Northern Virginia.
Don't forget our 50K in a day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We did a 50K in 24 hours where we split up, I believe, 5 or 6 runs.
Every 4 hours.
Every 4 hours,
so
yeah.
6, yeah.
So it was a long day, but it was quite the adventure, and I was so tired by the end of it. Now we can say we've done an ultra marathon, and you've done other ultra marathons since then.
One other one. My COVID was not the best to my waistline, but I'm getting back out there again. So
good. So I want to talk a little bit more about running, and how that adventure started for you. Tell me about that. When did you start getting into running?
I got into running when I was locked up.
Really?
I'd never run before. I was actually one of those guys who would get mad at trail runners when they'd go running down the trail. Like, that's not what they're supposed to be doing on the trail. You should be hiking and enjoying it, not running it.
The tables have turned.
Exactly. So I'd spent 16 and a half months in solitary confinement, which meant I was out of my cell for rec time for 1 hour every 14 days, basically. So I get to Lunenburg Prison, which is in Southside Virginia, and now I can have rec time like hours a day, and I love it. It was wonderful. So I start running there. They had what we decided, we being people that had been there before me had figured this out. It was about a third of a mile loop around the rec yard. So I started off my goal was to run 3 laps. There was one hill on this loop, which was about yay big.
Okay.
And that slowed me down sometimes when I first started out.
Sure.
But so I started doing that. I did that for about a year. I was in Lunenburg for about a year before I was released. Moved in with my parents for about a month and a half. And I started doing a little bit of running in the neighborhood. I get the job at Good Samaritan Ministries up here in Richmond. And now I'm on my own. And that job was just a part-time job, and I didn't start early in the morning. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to run down to the river and back. Well, running down to the river and back is about a 3-mile loop. Took me about an hour because I walked a lot of that because I couldn't handle running 3 miles. I could do a mile, and that was about it. So I did that on my own. And then I started running a little bit more. I began to get on the trails around the James River. There's about a 7-mile loop there, and I just kind of walked and ran and explored and figured it out. I heard about how did I end up there? I was at Roadrunners One. I think it's Lucky Road now. Running athletic shoe store in Carytown here in Richmond. getting some shoes because I knew I needed actual real shoes so I don't kill myself.
What were you running in before?
I was running in old sneakers.
Okay.
Like literally, these things were falling apart. My dad would super glue them together for me every few months. There was no tread on them.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, I need to do something that's not going to kill me.
Yeah.
So I bought my first pair of $100 shoes because that's what a good pair of trail running shoes costs. I figured if I'm going to go doing this, I want to make sure I don't die. Mm-hmm. And I'm down there telling the guy what I want, telling him what I need. I need something stable so I don't like twist my ankle and kill myself since I'm running by myself. It's like, oh, we know there's actually this trail running group. They meet every Tuesday night and they do a monthly trail run too. I'm like, really? So I meet up with this group, and these are people where they're like, oh, no, let me preface this by saying this is the most chill, fun group. I'm not going to talk about all the things that are consumed on their trail runs because their legality in Virginia now is a little questionable with the way things are going.
Is this the Hasher group?
No.
Okay.
This is the RVA monthly trail run crew that meets on Tuesday nights as well. Okay. It's just an incredible group of welcoming, accepting people. They're a little hardcore at times. Most of them will not sign up for anything less than a marathon because they think anything less than a marathon just is not worth their time for an actual official race. These are folks that do 50K, 50 milers, 100K, 100-mile type things. So they've got something. They're so much fun. So they introduced me to really the joy of trail running, the trail running community, which is kind of off kilter. It's not necessarily this intense road running group where everyone's always checking their watch, trying to do better and faster. A lot of it's just about having fun, running the downhills fast, walking some uphills and having fun, doing overnight trail runs, just stuff like that. So I got involved in that. Then I got to be a better runner. I started running with some younger guys. I'm 45 now. And for most of my time, I mean, you included, people I run with are younger than me. Mm-hmm. There's this one guy, Brad DeFrank, when we started running together on Sunday mornings before I'd go to church. And we would do 7 miles. And this dude was fast. Mm-hmm. And every Sunday morning, I'd be out there running with him. Then he moved out of town a little bit and started finding some other people to run with. And eventually COVID killed all that off. But it was just such a fun thing. I love going through the woods. Where I am now, and over in Bon Air, which is no longer in the heart of the city, but I'm like 10 minutes by foot, running by foot, from the James River. And there are trails down there. Mm-hmm. And so I have fun with it now. Like this spring, before it got everything started growing up, I did the southern traverse of Richmond along the James River, where I ran from the Huguenot Bridge, which is like actually a little bit west of there, along the James River, all the way down to the quarries on the east side of the river. It's about maybe a 13-mile run, 14-mile run, something like that. Some of it was bushwhacking. Mm-hmm. There was a surprising lack of no trespassing signs.
That's good.
Yeah, that's kind of but yeah, it's just, for me, it's fun. Mm-hmm. I like to run because I like to have fun. I like to run so I know no matter where I'm hiking, I'm going to be able to do that trail. Because if I can run 14 miles, which is not always the case this time of year, if anybody who was at that last trail run on Saturday morning, they know I cannot run 14 miles in this heat. I'm good for about 4 miles in this heat. But if I can run 14 miles during the wintertime, I can hike pretty much any day hike I want. And that's what I want to do. I just want to get out there and explore and have fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And with November Project,
mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about how you got involved with that group and what your experience has been like since then? Yeah,
actually, that's funny. That actually, sir, I forgot about. How could I forget Hal? Hal Higley was the first guy I ran with in Richmond. We were both on probation together, actually. And we were in our probation class, and we both mentioned we liked running. So he was the first guy I ran with on Sunday mornings. Mm-hmm. And so we were running, and I wasn't a race guy. He wanted to run the Richmond Marathon. I think it was like the half marathon, and that's in November. Mm-hmm. And I go with him to the package pickup. They got the big expo. One of my favorite things about running is the food in the expo. And we're wandering around there, and the Richmond Roadrunners has their booth set up, and I grab one of their magazines. Oh yeah, there's a whole group of a different list of running groups. Oh, that could be kind of fun. I'm flipping through, and this lady named Crystal, who is active in November Project, she'd written up about this new group. At the time they were new, they'd only been around for a few months. Mm-hmm. That was working out at the VMFA every Wednesday morning. I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. And I looked at Hal, I was like, I need something besides running because I don't like gyms. He's like, yeah, I could probably use that too. And it took us a couple weeks, but we finally got ourselves together to get up and to get over there to the VMFA at 6 a.m. And at the time, the November Project wasn't that big of a group, maybe 30 people, I guess. It was getting to be cold, so numbers were trailing off. I think during that winter time, it dropped down to like 10 people sometimes. And it was just this wonderful, accepting community. I didn't have my own community in Richmond. When I came back to Richmond, I knew nobody. I didn't have access to internet, so I was like using the back of Style Weekly's calendar, which, rest in peace. That's how I found community. But this November Project became one of my areas of community. And it was a young group. It was an active group. It was everything that I hadn't been in my past, but I wanted to be involved in. And I really ended up making some great friends. I had my wedding reception. You were there, back in January. And I looked around at my friends there, and except for the ones from church, everyone there, well, okay, there were a couple, there's some from church and there were some from Gallery 5, but most of my friends there were all people that I'd known through November Project.
Right.
Everyone at we had a little tiny wedding. And I think I had maybe 4 people there from my side, and they were all people I knew from November Project. All my closest friends, you included, are all people that I met, if not through November Project. November Project had a significant impact on our lives.
Yeah, and it definitely had an impact on my life, even though it's not a part of my life now. Doesn't mean it won't be, for the future. I think a part of me will always have a special place in my heart for November Project and the friendships that I formed there with you, as well as some other members of our friend group.
Our sweat squad.
Yeah, exactly. Most of whom were able to attend my wedding as well. Jim was our minister, so it was really special having him there in that role too. It was and is such a great place for building community, and I think that's awesome that you were able to find that community that you desperately needed after you got out of prison from that group there.
Well, that was one of the key things. It was that group. It was a group at my church, and for a while there was a 12-step community, and then there was also Gallery 5. At the time, they had a game night going on Wednesday nights, and those were my little circles of friends. That's where as we were talking about, what makes David David, it was exploring the different aspects of who I am in these different spaces. At my wedding, I had folks from all those different groups that I started off back in 2016 when I got to town, knowing nobody. Some aspect of each of those groups still exists in my life because I made those good friends.
Yeah, that's great. And like we said, you got married to Kelsey, who's now your wife, earlier this year.
Last year, actually, it was in November. Party was in January, though. We had the 3-month wedding, which was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Kelsey, obviously she's such a big part of your life now. I know, you guys dated for a little while, but before you were engaged. And you became friends and then eventually started dating. Can you talk about that?
So we met very new school. We were found each other on Bumble. She gave me this opening line. It's on my profile. I said I was overly optimistic, which is really why I keep on pushing through stuff, because I refuse to see how bad things get sometimes. I'm overly optimistic. She replies, overly optimistic, meet grounded and practical. It's like, oh, well, look at this. This is interesting. So we had our first date at Stoplight Gelato, which was over by Gallery 5.
Yeah, also R.I.P.
Yes, also R.I.P. But they had this wonderful little thing. You could get like a 25-cent scoop of gelato, which when you're making pennies, that's a wonderful place for a first date. And I'd actually planned it so that I had to leave because another mutual friend of ours, Jason, and I were going to go see the Weird Al Yankovic concert that night. Yeah, so okay. Classy, right? But so Kelsey and I end up hitting it off. We have a great time. Instead of having to use that as my excuse to leave, I've got Jason texting me like, dude, where are you? We need to get going to get there to the concert. And so we started dating, and she was really my first relationship post-divorce, post-prison, and all of that. And I didn't know how good I had it. So I ended up breaking things off after about 6 months or so. Went our separate ways. COVID happened. And we would kind of randomly text every now and then. I'd thank her for something. She'd thank me for something. Just like little bits, little touches here and there. Mm-hmm. And it was actually when you and I were running over Pocahontas. I don't remember why we were running over there, but it was January or something like that. And you had asked me before we ran, like, have you heard from Kelsey lately? I'm like, no, I don't. We don't really run in the same circle. I probably won't see her again. And we get back from our run, and I'm looking at my phone because Strava, right? Right. And I see that I've got a text message from Kelsey. And this was right after the inauguration, Biden's inauguration, and everyone was passing around those Bernie Sanders memes. And Kelsey was had worked on a lot of the campaigns and worked for the Obama White House. And so she sent me one of those Bernie Sanders memes with him in the mittens and the glove and the coat and everything like that. I was like, well, look who just texted me. So we began to circle back again then. But I still wasn't ready to commit to a relationship with her because I still hadn't realized how good I had it with her. And I started another relationship, and that one did not go well. And I stepped back and I said, why am I doing all this to myself? I was in this wonderful relationship with a person that I love and a person that loves me. And why the heck am I trying to find something better than this wonderful gift that I've been given? I mean, there are a lot of guys that I know that have gone through prison through the charges that I've had and similar ones like that struggle for their whole lives to find somebody who loves and accepts them. And here I have that. Not only does she love and accept me, she's actually emotionally stable. I mean, let's be honest, when you're in your 40s and you're dating, the actual pool of people that are single and want to date and are emotionally healthy is very, very small, because all the people that are emotionally healthy and want to date, they're already claimed by other emotionally healthy people who want to date too. So
yeah, it makes me think of a meme from How I Met Your Mother. This is a throwback, but Barney, one of the characters on the show, was talking about like the triangle of dating, and the three sides are like attractive, single, and sane. Pick two.
Yep. Exactly.
So yeah, that makes sense. You know,
and the older you get, the harder it gets to find those three.
Yeah. And yeah, it's complicated. Dating is hard, especially as you get older. But I'm so glad that you guys found each other and reconnected. You know, I've had a similar journey with my wife, Suzanne. You know, we dated for a few months, and then I broke things off because I wanted to date other people. And then in hindsight, I realized I let a good thing go. And, you know, thankfully, by some miracle, we reconnected on a different dating app.
Well, I like this part because if I remember right, the first time you guys connected was on Tinder, right? But then you matured and you're dating this.
Matured to him.
Exactly. I think that's just like really tells the story of how we go through these relationships. I mean, whenever you're starting over, it's like you're really trying to figure it out, and you grow in that process, and it's that growth that makes life exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I know you've had some incredible opportunities traveling with Kelsey since you guys got engaged. And like, did you meet President Obama on your honeymoon?
No, actually, I met President Obama a couple days after I proposed to Kelsey. So, Kelsey was the deputy director of scheduling in advance for the White House for Obama's first term, and then she ran housing for his the second convention where he was nominated down in Charlotte, nominated the second time in Charlotte. So she had a really close working relationship with President Obama. She worked on Michelle Obama's book tour as well, and so when he does these international trips now, when he needs extra help, they'll sometimes call Kelsey to go along. So I had planned on proposing to Kelsey, but it was going to be a very low-key proposal. I mean, I did it in in a Renaissance palace, so all I had to do was get down on my knee. The palace took care of everything else. But I hadn't planned on meeting Obama. I hadn't even planned on being at the event. I was going to be off running through these trails in northern Denmark. I mean, we're so far north in Denmark that Rick Steves' guidebook doesn't even cover it. So I was going to run through the trails. I was going to be eating at some little Danish restaurant, but they ended up needing me over there. So I put on my best clothes, which for this trip meant a pair of blue jeans and the trail running jacket. You probably saw me in many cold mornings out of Pocahontas State Park. So there I am with the trail running jacket with this little zipper and the little thumb holes on. And I'm leading around some VIPs, getting them to the right spot. I'm helping with the photographer, making sure he's in the right spots to do the different things. And apparently Kelsey is having these conversations because we'd announced our engagement like the night before, and the Secret Service agents there had told the Secret Service agents they were with Obama in Copenhagen, where he was at the time, hey, Kelsey just got engaged. So he's like, I want to meet this guy. Yeah. And Kelsey's like, why? So here I am in my little running jacket and my jeans, sitting back with the photographer, just having a good old chat. And I get this text on my phone saying, Beho wants to meet you. Get in the back of the picture line. I'm like, wow. Okay. So here I am meeting Barack Obama in my best blue jeans and my best running jacket. But it was just as relaxed and fun as could be. Kelsey has a great relationship with him. They joke around, they laugh, they talk, but they also get business done when it needs to be done. Mm-hmm. I'm at the end of the line, so there's no pressure on him. We start chatting. I don't remember how it begins, but I say something along the lines of, well, I had to size up my major competition for Kelsey. And he's like, well, you know, if I was 10 years younger and I hadn't met Michelle, you never know what might have happened. And there's Danish media out here, yeah. and there's people taking pictures, and Kelsey is turning beet red. He's like, you can't say things like that. But I mean, it was such a fun and relaxed time. I mean, I understand why they call it no drama Obama. So it was a really fun experience. I hope to get to go on some more in the future. And
yeah, for sure. So what does Kelsey do for work now? Does she still work in politics?
Politics she just kind of fell into through the event side of things. But she is, what do you call it? She's like special assistant to a COO at one of the big financial firms in town. But yeah, she's living her best life. We got the horse out in Powhatan. She does some traveling for politics when needed. A little trip here and there. Mm-hmm. Hope to go someplace soon, or maybe on one of the book tours. Every now and then she gets an invite. We got an invite back in, I guess it was November of last year, but darn wedding and honeymoon got in the way of that. So
cool. Well, yeah, in regards to married life, how's that been going?
I turn off lights behind her, and she closes drawers behind me. We've got this wonderful balance. Yeah. Jim Somerville, he mentioned earlier, he did our premarital counseling. Mm-hmm. And he's like, if you go into this 50-50, you're both going to end up disappointed. Actually, I think you might have done something with Jim as well. You and Sue did something with Jim as well. Yeah. If you go into this with 50-50, you're each going to end up disappointed. But if you go into it like 75-75, mm-hmm. Jim, if you're watching this, I don't know what numbers you said, but you get the idea. Right. If you go into 75-75, then you're always going to be there for the other person. You're always going to be receiving more than you expect. And that's really what we do. I mean, right now, her horse, Livy, she has a Hanoverian warm blood. If you any of you guys are horse people, you know what I mean. If you're not, I don't know what I mean, so it's okay. And the thing had to have emergency surgery a couple weeks ago, which means right after this, we're heading out to the barn like we do every single night and spend about an hour or so over there cleaning stalls, cleaning bandages, cleaning wounds, bathing, stuff like that. But you know what? I love her. I never would choose to spend my life that way. I'd have no desire to go out to a barn to play with a horse. It's not my thing. Horses are dangerous. I do adventuresome. I don't do dangerous. But because I love her, I love what she does. And she's the same way with me. Mm-hmm. She might not be the happiest when I went on a 3-week road trip last year and made my way down to Mexico. But she understands that for me, that's recharges me. That time alone, that time exploring, like we talked about earlier, just recharges me. And she's like, all right, go for it. We make the deal. I won't set my alarm in the morning, but if I wake up at 5:30, I'm going to go running, or I'm going to go to the November Project. I don't think she realized how easily I wake up at 5:30 in the morning when we made this deal. But we found this balance. Is it always going to be perfect? Heck no.
Yeah.
But going back to that love thing, choosing to love somebody, you choose to work through those issues. You choose to give them the benefit of the doubt, and you don't let those little voices in the back of your head and we all have them, right? Those negative voices really derail your relationship. And you have that, and because you trust each other, you love each other, you have those open conversations.
Right. It all comes down to choices, I think. I wrote my vows to Suzanne. You know, we make the decision, we make the choice to love each other and to be our best for each other. And I think really that is the key to a successful marriage, like choosing to be there for each other, choosing to, you know, maybe not say the first thought that comes to your mind, and you know, listening to the other person better, and choosing to be a better communicator.
Choosing
really
to be
important.
brave in that communication.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that can be the hardest thing, is sharing what scares you, sharing what your fears are, and sometimes sharing what those hurts are. Because I don't know about you, but I can sometimes want to hold those in because I don't want to upset the other person.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you keep it in yourself, and it grows and festers and becomes a problem. But being able to say, look, this scares me. This is important to me. I want you to be a part of this.
Yeah, it's crucial. We're moving towards wrapping up. I'm curious to know if you have any trips or like running adventures planned on the horizon.
The horse surgery, horses are expensive.
Yeah.
That took away most of our travel fund for this year. But I am hoping, once everything gets stabilized with Livy, to go up to New England late summer, early fall, before things get too hectic with politics. And there are a few hikes I want to do. I want to hike to the top of Katahdin Mountain. That's one of my childhood dreams. I remember reading about it in one of the very first Boys Life issues I ever got when I was a Cub Scout, about this group that hiked there. It's the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. To the southern terminus a few years ago. So I want to get up there, hike that. I want to hike up to the top of Mount Washington, not take the Cog Railroad or drive or whatever, but hike up there. And then there's the Pimmy Loop, which is about a 30-mile loop amongst the White Mountains, bagging a bunch of big peaks up there. They can probably do in about 3, maybe 4 nights, let's be honest here. So that's my next trip that I have planned as far as exciting stuff. Kelsey and I are hoping to get to either Norway for the Northern Lights, or out to Egypt and doing the whole Cairo cruise and pyramids and stuff like that. So one of those two is our next big one. But as I said, horses are expensive. Did not realize how expensive horses were. Didn't realize the sickness and health vow went with the horses too, not just the wife.
Yeah, that is true. You did not get married to the horse, but you got married to the horse owner.
Yep.
Yeah, those are some big trips. And, you know, before I let you leave, I have to ask you about your bike. So, did you get your bike fixed yet?
Okay, so a little bit of background for y'all. I lived for several years in the east of Richmond with a buddy of mine. And Dave, the guy who I picked up out west that time, he actually helped find me a bike during COVID and introduced me to bike riding as an adult. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was like probably 22. I think I rode one right after I got out of college. And I lived in the east end of Richmond where everything was bikeable. I could bike to my church 10 minutes away biking faster than I could drive and park there. I'd bike to November Project. I would bike everywhere if I couldn't walk to it. I could go a week or two without driving. Now I live in the wonderful suburban part of Richmond called Bon Air, where literally I cannot walk anywhere in 20 minutes unless it's still in the subdivision I live in. So there are no good bike paths over there either. The bike is still sitting upside down in the shed, waiting for me to get a tire on it, because I realized the tire I had squeezed on there was like a size too small. So I need to get a size bigger for it. But my little fun goal, this is thinking about possibly this summer, is do a little mini triathlon several times a week. So bike down to the Huguenot flat water, access to the James River, swim out and back across the river, nothing too intense, and then do, I don't know, 400 yards maybe, 200 yards each way possibly. I mean, it's not too big. Mr. Triathlon across the seat from me here.
Hey, I only did a small one. I'm just curious.
But yeah, so just ride my bike down there, swim across, swim back, and then there's a flat trail down there I do an out and back on. So I want to do that. That's kind of my goal for that. But it's where I live now, it's just not practical to cycle anywhere. I miss it. I miss being in the city. I love Kelsey, don't get me wrong, but I am a city guy at heart, and I do miss being in the city and being able to bike so many places. Joining up with you guys, with Casual Encounters or with Broad Street Bullies, and just going out on those big group rides. I do miss that, but yeah.
Well, if you ever get your bike fixed or get another bike that you could ride, I would love to do one of those like personal triathlon training days with you. That'd be sweet. That'd
be a lot of fun. Yeah, that might give me the motivation. All it needs is the actual tire. The tube's good. Everything else is fine. Just a little oil on it, the right size tire, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, you could probably get one for like $25, $30, something like that.
Just go down to Outpost. Give them some love.
Yeah, they might even have something used for you. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, David. This has been a great conversation, and it's always a pleasure sitting down and talking with you.
Well, Joe, thank you for doing this. I mean, it's great that you're taking the time to get people to share their stories about transformation. I mean, when we're in those spots where we feel like we're in a dead end, sometimes it's just hearing that one story of somebody else who's been at that dead end and has found a way to make it around or turn around or climb over or dig under, whatever it might be. So thank you for doing this, man. I appreciate it. I love it. I love you.
Of course. I love you too, man. Thank you. Hey, David. Welcome back to Evolve Podcast. We got a part 2. You recently had your film festival, which we talked about in part 1. So I wanted to get back on here with you and hear how it went. So give me the highlights.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for inviting me back. The film festival was incredible. We had it here in Richmond on October 14th, and it was more than I could hope for. The original plan, my goal and my hope for this festival was to really elevate the voices of people who survived incarceration so that we don't just change, but we blow up the narrative about what it means to have been incarcerated by giving folks a platform to share their stories on their terms. And we definitely did that. But beyond that, we also were able to create a community. We created a community of people coming together from around the country that have been impacted by incarceration and allowing them to basically be celebrated for what they've achieved post-incarceration. So we had these incredible films. We had spoken word. We had art from folks who are incarcerated for life, forever, right? And they were able to get their voice, their message out of those prison walls and into the public. And that's really what excited me about it. The other thing I was really thrilled about was we had these film directors, these previously incarcerated folks, people that have survived incarceration, come in. And we had one from Ohio, one from Georgia, and one from Wisconsin. They were all part of the Represent Justice group. And this is a fellowship for folks who have been incarcerated to really teach them how not only to make films, but to market films and to really show them how to have a voice in this film space. So, and it was great. It was wonderful. I was so excited about how it turned out.
That's awesome, man. So can you tell me a bit about the films that you showed?
Sure. So we had a variety of films that we showed, and a lot of these are available on YouTube or Vimeo, if I said that right. You are the video guy, so you probably know the right word.
Got it.
All right. So we can probably drop these in the links in the description, however that works here.
Are they on your website as well? Do you have a website for it?
I do, yes, and thrivefilmfestival.org. So, yes, check that out. We have all that's linked there. We started off with 2 short films. One was called Two Wolves, which was directed by a guy named Shannon Ross out of Wisconsin. And he runs a group called The Community, which is all about changing the narrative on what it means to have been incarcerated. So great value alignment there. And his was a creative, almost, I would call it basically spoken word, but dramatized. So really powerful, really moving. A combination of animation and live action, talking about the Two Wolves narrative. You have the two wolves, you can see the taking that story. So we started with that. And the second one we did was called Still Here, which is from a young filmmaker who's at Columbia in New York. Her dad and uncles all dealt with crime, incarceration, and she really looks at it from the family side, really like a family scrapbook, the American dream and incarceration and all these things kind of tied together. And she does a wonderful job storytelling there. And she follows basically her dad and uncle's childhood in Michigan to adulthood to now they're actually all out and they're all free and finding their own paths forward. Let's see, we had a film by the ACLU of Virginia called Hidden Injustice, looking at the prison system. And while that didn't quite, the idea of the film didn't really go with what I was looking at because it was more about what's happening in the prisons. It was focusing on the lives and works of activists who had survived incarceration. So that's what really excited me about that.
Was that more of a documentary style?
Yeah, definitely. That was more documentary.
Cool.
Another documentary we showed was Art and Crimes, the story of Jesse Crimes. And that just won the Emmy for Outstanding Documentary Arts and Culture. We were the first place in Virginia to screen that after it won the Emmy about a week or so ago. So that was really exciting. His story, he was dealing with drug addiction and the collateral effects of that, got incarcerated, and while he was locked up, discovered art as his way of expressing himself. And while he was locked up, I love this, while he was locked up, he got a hold of bed sheets and made this massive piece of art. Fills up a maybe 20 by 50 foot space with this bed sheet artwork that just blew my mind. And it shows his story of the struggles he's faced post-incarceration. Now, he is now at a point where he's actually getting recognition, international recognition for his work. And he's really trying to use his platform to bring light to other artists who've been incarcerated. So it's a wonderful story there. You can stream that on Paramount and a lot of the other streaming services right now. Let's see. We also had two other films by previously incarcerated filmmakers. Paige Dukes out of Georgia did a short film called Until We All Count, which is a documentary focusing on the struggles to get the right to vote back in Georgia. Basically, in Georgia, once you're disenfranchised, once you've been incarcerated, you can't get that right to vote back unless you get a specific pardon from the governor. Now, that's almost what's happening here in Virginia. Starting before Governor McDonnell, the Republican governor a few terms ago, you basically couldn't get your right to vote back. It was this huge, 20-page thing. You had to go in front of a judge. It was an incredibly difficult situation. But starting with Governor McDonnell, they made it easier and easier and easier until McAuliffe basically had automatic rights restoration once you had completed your supervised probation. Actually, it was once you paid off your fines. Just really straightforward stuff. That, unfortunately, has been rolled back. So that film really hit home with the folks from Virginia that were in the audience.
I bet.
There was another one, which was actually a dramatic retelling of Tawana Davis's experience. She got out of prison and she thought she was doing fine. And somebody basically filed a false report about her. And she is in Ohio, where she's from, in Ohio. The probation department can basically lock you up for, I think, 90 days without having to show cause. So she got locked up, even though she hadn't violated, and she couldn't do anything to get out because the way their laws were written is you have to, if the probation department wants to, they can lock you up while they investigate. So she did a dramatic retelling of that. And everyone that was in that film was someone who had been justice system impacted. Wow. And it was really kind of fun because you had these folks playing the probation officers who were folks who had been in prison. So they said that one of them was there. They actually had a lot of fun playing that role and kind of role reversal in life. Yeah. I think that was all the films that we screened. We have one more that we accepted into the film festival. It is called Recall Reframed, and it's looking at the recall election in California for a judge. This was the judge who had sentenced the Stanford swimmer, sexual assault, to what the prosecutor had asked for, but it was very low in the eyes of the public. So big outrage, and he got recalled. And this examines the impact of that on people who are being sentenced in California. So they have this graph that basically is the storyline of this graph showing the levels of average sentencing. It's kind of making its way down like it is around the country. This judge gets recalled, and then that shoots up. And it shows how now people are getting sentenced much more harshly in California because of this recall election. And what does that mean for judges, for lawyers? It really takes more of an academic professional approach to it. So we're working on getting that to be shown at one of the law schools here in Virginia, possibly UVA or William and Mary Law.
Does that take into account like the convictions against people of color compared to white people? Like
it digs into that as well. Yes, looking at all this because it's really a fascinating documentary because it dives into how public opinion informs sentencing, which is historically we've seen that in minorities, the oppressed minorities having longer sentences than somebody white like myself. So this really builds on that, and it shows how this recall election had a chilling effect on sentencing in California.
Well, it sounds like you had quite the interesting and diverse collection of films, like you said, and like you mentioned, everyone can stream those. They're linked on your website with like the YouTube videos or like the other streaming sites. So definitely check those out. I definitely plan to as well. And, it's great to hear that you built this amazing community. It sounds like the fruition of everything you've been working towards with the InThrive brand, like we talked about in part one. Is that sort of how you feel about InThrive up to this point?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because the whole name InThrive means from incarceration to thriving. Is that aspirational? Of course it is. But if we don't have aspirations, where do we go to, right? So that's really what this is all about. It's about showing how people can go from this place of despair, of punishment, to this place of really fulfilling who they are. I mean, artistic expression really gets down to that root of who we are. And you're only able to do that if you go on the old hierarchy of needs until you get all these other basic things taken care of. So highlighting and amplifying these voices of folks that are artists who have been incarcerated, it shows that, look, we can get there. It's possible. There are a lot of barriers in our way, but we can remove those barriers and we can really allow people to thrive. And what I'm really excited about is so many people there really caught this vision that I'm now talking with folks from Northern Virginia about doing a version of the festival up there, talking with folks in San Francisco about doing a version out there, doing one in the Midwest, doing one down possibly in Atlanta, just really taking this idea of celebrating those voices because there's so much in activism that is about the pain and suffering, right? I mean, that's what drives activism. You don't become an activist because everyone's happy. You become an activist because there's some pain you're trying to remove. But this gives a different light to what's happening. Yes, there is pain. Yes, there's suffering. You see so much of that trauma in these stories that are shown on the screen. But the gathering is really joyous. I've had so many videos pop up on Instagram and Facebook of people at the festival, and they're smiling and they're live. They're standing in front of the big InThrive Film Festival, Steph and Repeat out front, just excited to have a place to celebrate what we've achieved post-incarceration. So we hope to replicate that around the country. If any of you all viewers want to help with that, check out the website, get in touch with me through there, InThriveFF@gmail.com, and we want to bring this to more places. The filmmakers are excited about it. The connections with the community are incredible. So let's just keep it rolling.
Not to mention just giving people an outlet to share their story, to share the work that they've done, to tell that story. It's really beautiful. And, as a creator and storyteller myself, like, I know the value of that, like providing that representation, providing that opportunity for more people to see your work and to hear your story. It's really powerful.
In that power, that it's really that hope. So even in these trauma-filled stories, you get this hope because there's the overcoming in this place.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks ago, I was invited to go to CCAT, the Chesterfield County Adult, I don't know what it is. Basically, it's like a reentry women's prison down in Chesterfield County. It's part of the Virginia Department of Corrections. And I had my little table there talking about it, just trying to give folks a little bit of hope about, hey, there are people that want to hear stories by folks like you and me once you get out. Well, the warden down there was so excited about what we're doing, she actually sent a van load of folks who are still currently incarcerated to go to the festival, to see what was going on, to watch the films. And they got so excited about it. Now they're going to make their own film at that prison. So like, this is what it's about. Equipping people to tell the story on their terms. So
yeah. Have you had any conversations with that warden about like what that would look like for them? Like, would they supply like camera equipment to the inmates?
Yeah, so that's what they're looking at doing. They already have a photography program in that prison. So I think this is just taking it to that next level. So they are going to be writing script. They're going to be creating it. One of the things I really want to focus on with the film festival as it goes forward is having what you call more of like an emerging filmmakers area. So all these films that we screened were fairly professionally produced. They either had full on massive budgets behind them, like the Art and Crimes documentary, or they had foundation support, like any of the ones from Represent Justice. But just as one of the panelists said, one of the filmmaking panelists said, you can do it with a cell phone. You don't need the $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 budget for a short.
Mm-hmm.
You can take your cell phone, you can take the free editing software online, you can put it together, and you can make something. It's not going to be as refined and polished, but it's still your voice getting out there. It's still the opportunity for you to begin to share those stories. So I want to see that as a part of the film festival going forward.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of Gary Vee's famous quotes that I always think of when it comes to content creation is document, don't create. People want to hear your story from your perspective, and when you're focusing on documenting what's happening and not necessarily like creating a polished version of that, you can tell real stories and capture really interesting stuff. And you see like more raw documentary videos coming out from time to time, and people are captivated by that because there is so much of the like polished videos and movies out there. So it's nice to see something raw from time to time, that is more relatable, as long as it's like not too shaky and you can watch it.
As long as it sounds good. That's the big thing right there.
Too. Yeah, definitely. There are affordable ways around that. It sounds to me like, the film festival, like venue, that medium is something that's worked really well for you, and you plan on repeating that. So is that like where you see the brand of InThrive continuing to go?
Yeah, I definitely see this as a space that we can expand into. And I want to emphasize here, when we think of film festival, like I went to some of the screenings for the Richmond International Film Festival a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, you go to the theater, there might be one panel discussion, maybe the filmmaker, a few people, something like that. And that's it. Maybe you see a few films. This InThrive Film Festival is more about creating this community.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did this at First Baptist Church. They donated their facility, and they had this large, they call it their dining room. It's this massive hall. And that's where we did.
Right?
What was that?
It's like a ballroom.
Yeah, like a ballroom, exactly. A ballroom, big, beautiful screen, incredible sound. If you're ever trying to do something in Richmond with film and you're looking for an alternative place, yeah, First Baptist, highly recommend. But what was great about this space was, one, you had this wonderful space for screening, excellent audio, excellent visual. But then right beside it, with one of those movable walls, you had the gymnasium, which is where we set up our community partners and our sponsors. So then you had all these tables of folks that had been previously incarcerated that are running their own businesses, or nonprofits working to remove barriers for folks post-incarceration, or artists that have been incarcerated or are currently incarcerated, all in this space. So in this one area, you can flow back and forth between storytelling and community. And I think that's really what made this festival special. It wasn't just sitting down watching movies, which is very one-way, right? You're either the creator who has created the film, or you are the viewer who is intaking the experience. But with these other parts, we really made it a community experience. And I think that's what I want to replicate, because if we're just listening, it's like, okay, yeah, that's nice. I can do that on YouTube at home. I can do that in Vimeo at home, right? But creating the community, interacting, and seeing these people. I mean, when I was getting messages that same evening, hey, David, can you connect me with the speaker that said this? Or can you connect me with the filmmaker that made this? And that's what it's about. It's bringing people together to create a bigger community and changing the narrative, blowing up the narrative on incarceration, which I said, that's in Thrive's brand, right? Incarceration to thriving. That's what we're trying to do, is equip people, help make sure that that is the reality, not just an aspirational statement.
Are you providing any sort of resources or like links to different references people can use if they are, looking to work as a filmmaker or connect with other filmmakers or artists?
Yeah, we are working towards that goal. So right now I'm pointing a lot of folks to Represent Justice, because that's one of the major organizations in the country, in the United States, that's working in this space of equipping folks to become filmmakers. But really, it's just a matter of pulling that information together, because it's not a space that is very well defined, which is exciting because it's not defined. I mean, I had people I was discovering like a week before the film festival. I was like, I'd love to show your film, but I'm already completely booked with programming. So just trying to create that community online as well. So you'll be seeing that build out as we get more information about that, as we pull in more resources.
Yeah, makes sense. And, it's great to hear that you are building more awareness of your brand as well. So, that will only increase more interest in future events.
Oh, can we take a little sidestep on this whole brand awareness thing?
Yeah.
This is not my forte. I am not a branding guy. That's just never been my thing.
Right.
My wife, Kelsey Laris, is an events person. And she said, well, you've got to do a step and repeat. I didn't even know what a step and repeat was. I was like, is that like 4 or 5 different banners all going down? I was like, didn't realize that one of those big things was like the logo over and over again. People love that. I had no idea. There have been pictures all over social media of folks smiling and laughing and hugging, getting their picture taken in front of it. And that's really created this image of what the Thrive brand is. It's, yes, I have been incarcerated. Now I'm thriving. I'm happy. I'm joyous because I've made it from there to here. I survived that pain. I made it through that trauma that got me incarcerated. Because let's be honest, the trauma that gets you incarcerated, the trauma that causes you to do the things that get you incarcerated, we've got to overcome that too. Then we've got to overcome the trauma of incarceration. And that's where a lot of these folks are now. They've made it through the trauma that led them to be incarcerated, the trauma of incarceration. And now they're in this thriving point where they can smile and be happy as they've been telling these stories. So and there's the Thrive brand all over that. I had no idea, but people absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I couldn't agree more. It's a great photo opportunity. It's very shareable. It encourages people to share that they're at this event, and it elevates it too. You see that type of thing, like a step and repeat at like different like red carpet events, and it makes it more of an experience. Yeah. You've built this community with this first event. How do you plan on sustaining it? Like, you've talked a little bit about that here and there, but What are your plans going forward?
What I did immediately after the event, I collected emails. I had the emails of my film creators, of my sponsors, of my community partners. Those were the nonprofits and folks who've been impacted by incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
And of a bunch of people who registered to attend the event. So I created 4 Google Forms, basic short little surveys to immediately ask them, hey, what can we do to make this better next time? What did you like? What did you not like? So immediately engaging people so that they feel not only do they get to experience the event, but that in Thrive Film Festival is interested in their feedback to make the event better. So we've got that point of contact there. I've encouraged all of our filmmakers, and we also had, I don't want to leave these folks out, Breaking Free Poets. They are phenomenal spoken word artists. Oh my goodness. Check them out online, Breaking Free Poets. They met while they were at the Petersburg Federal Prison, Petersburg FCI, and they do spoken word. They're based up and down the East Coast. Mm-hmm. Check them out. They came in and they performed at the film festival, blew my mind. People were up and clapping and just going crazy for it. So it was awesome. But yeah, creating this space where we are able to amplify all the work that's being done, all this creative energy, all this creative output that's happening from within this community. So I'm telling folks, hey, when you do something, let me know. Let me amplify it on our networks so that you're getting beyond just that Ohio network or that Rep Justice network or the Breaking Free Poets East Coast. Like, let's get this out to more people so that more people see what's going on. Going forward, as we bring this festival to more cities, the whole idea is not so much the Thrive Film Festival, but bringing the community together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm making a connection with all these different folks that came on Saturday. But then if this business incubator, because we've got a business incubator that has folks that have been previously incarcerated right here in Richmond working in this space, if they can then get connected with this guy who's down in Danville, for example, who's a startup coach, which you put those two together and, whoa, what else can we do here now? Feeding off of each other. Then with this Herbert's Jams and Jellies, which is a place up in Palmyra, Virginia, rural Virginia, between Richmond and Charlottesville, who is hiring specifically people who get out of federal prison to give them a job, to get them trained up so that then they can go off and have another full-time job. And so she can keep on repeating this. So now she can work with those people, that startup, that business incubator folks, to expand her business and her management model so that she can help more people. And then in turn, those folks go off in more places. It's this multiplying effect. So really doing what we can to connect these people, both through Thrive itself, through our social media channels, through our website, through our email list, as well as just making these connections so that they can then really have that multiplying effect in the work that they're doing.
Incredible, man. Sounds like you're on a great path to making many connections and helping a lot of people along the way.
Yeah, I'm excited about what can happen here. So hopefully DC, Northern Virginia soon, hopefully San Francisco soon, and Midwest maybe, Atlanta maybe. We'll see what happens.
Anything's possible. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's incredible what you built, and I can't wait to see it grow even more.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you at it next year in Richmond. So
yes, absolutely. Well, that's all I have for now. Thank you again for joining me and giving us an update on the festival. I'm glad it went well. And looking forward to seeing more from Thrive.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Thrive Film Festival. We're on Instagram and Facebook. And if you're looking at the other side of Thrive Advocacy Solutions, thriveadvocacy.com. So just doing what we can to change the narrative, to blow up the narrative about what it means to have been incarcerated.
Thanks for watching Evolved Podcast. Follow at evolvedpodcast.co on Instagram for weekly updates. Subscribe to Evolve Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and like your favorite episodes. Production and editing by Joe Fitzpatrick. Our theme music, Endless Cruise, is written and performed by Fingers, spelled F1NG3RS.